at 42 million.
The art world, where paintings change hands for fortunes.
Sold, thank you very much.
But for every known masterpiece, there may be another still waiting to be discovered.
This is it.
International art dealer Philip Mould and I have teamed up to hunt for lost works by great artists. We use old-fashioned detective work and state-of-the-art science to get to the truth.
Science can enable us to see beyond the human eye.
Oh my goodness.
Every case is packed with surprise and intrigue.
Is it, or isn't it a Freud then?
But not every painting is quite what it seems.
Gosh, why didn't I notice that before?
It's a journey that can end in joy.
There is enough to support the conclusion that it is by Tom Roberts.
Or bitter disappointment.
I don't think it's a work by Gauguin. I'm very sorry.
In this episode, can we prove this unusual still life is by one of the masters of 20th century art, Giorgio de Chirico?
This painting really intrigues me. This is what one could imagine possibly of a de Chirico.
It was found in a junk shop, but its owner hopes he's unearthed a treasure.
I'm amazed you managed to find amongst all this stuff.
We undertake a forensic investigation.
I found what I suppose you could describe as drops of blood at the crime scene.
We head to Rome to uncover the artist's unusual paint recipes.
Vinegar, rubber gum, and miele, which is honey.
And in a Fake or Fortune first, we travel to a nuclear lab to test the picture like never before. But this is an artist the fakers love.
A word of warning, there are a huge number of forgeries out there.
This time we're investigating what could be one of the best bargains we've ever seen on Fake or Fortune.
What can you buy for £1 these days, Philip?
£1, okay. A couple of pints of milk, a bottle of water, an avocado pan.
That is very you. Or you could stick £1 in a supermarket trolley, buy a packet of crisps, as I did at the railway station only yesterday. Or you could buy a painting by one of the 20th century's great artists.
So we're not dealing with some family heirloom on a castle wall?
No, we are looking at something bought for £1 that could have been bought by anyone in the country.
We're on our way to the Cotswolds to meet an owner whose picture has been an unsolved mystery for almost 30 years. We've come to meet Bob Kay and his wife, Vanessa.
Hello, Fiona, I'm Bob. Hi. Hello, Philip. Nice to meet you. Come in.
Bob bought his unsigned picture as a young man on a hunch for next to nothing.
Right. So this is it then, Bob, the painting you bought for £1.
This is the painting.
And it's a strange one. A small, still life of fresh fruit sat in a wind-blown landscape.
Where did you get it from?
I bought it in 1993, just after I'd left university, at a bric-a-brac or house clearance shop in Lymington, in Hampshire.
So what about this picture drew your attention?
Well, so many pictures that are on the wall in bric-a-brac shops are brown 19th century landscape oils and wishy-washy watercolours. And this was so distinct and vibrant and competent, and I thought, it's worth £1.
£1 of anyone's money.
That's right.
I have to say, if I'd seen that for £1, I'd have bought it.
And
Yes.
do you remember this, Vanessa? Were you together back then?
Yeah, we weren't married. We both just left university, but I used to come and visit, and Bob would often tell me about things he'd found. He was always looking for interesting pieces of art.
And what did you then find out about it?
Well, I didn't know who the painting was by. And a friend, an art dealer, he saw the painting and he mentioned the name Giorgio de Chirico.
Giorgio de Chirico was amongst the most influential figures of 20th century art. Born in 1888 in Greece, most of his career was in Italy. His style combined the classical past with a dreamlike landscape that paved the way for surrealist artists like Salvador Dali and filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock. And his works can be extremely valuable.
Lot 115, the De Chirico, 1917, at 200,000 then. Sold.
So could Bob's friend have helped him uncover a possible fortune?
If it is by Giorgio de Chirico, what would it be worth? More than £1, obviously.
Well, if it is by de Chirico, I think it's an interesting, quirky painting, and it's just the sort of thing that a collector of this area who wanted a painting with a slight difference would go for. I could see it, I don't know, up to £50,000.
Right.
Wow.
A good return, if it is right.
Bad, Bob.
Well, I've got £1 riding on it.
Since he was a young man, Bob has had a passion for art. His career took him to the city, but in recent years he's turned his hobby into a profession and now deals in British painting.
Since dealing, I deal in 20th century British art, and even then, just 50 years of 20th century British, from 1920 to about 1970.
So this is not your thing at all?
Well, it's taken me 20 years to get a firm grasp on 50 years of British art. For a Greek-born Italian artist, no, not familiar with.
You see, I get that entirely.
It's been in a cupboard, as I was unsure where to go or what to do with it.
So this is a painting from your dim, distant past, and it's just hung around as an unsolved mystery.
Yes, no one has seen it since now 1997.
Wow.
I want to dig a bit deeper into this picture's junk shop past.
I bought the picture from a bric-a-brac house clearance shop called Aladdin's Cave.
Very appropriate.
Very appropriate.
Did it have any paperwork with it at all?
Absolutely none at all.
And any idea where they might have got it from?
No, there were rumours of a retired military gentleman who lived nearby who had died but had collected throughout his lifetime 20th century European works. I did not know his name, I did not know where he lived, just a very vague rumour.
Back upstairs, I've taken out my torch for a closer look.
This painting really intrigues me. I mean, to all intents and purposes, it's a normal still life, the type of paintings that have been done since Renaissance times. But it's different somehow. I mean, the first is the way that the whole composition is made more intense by the fact that the two sides have been cropped. It brings it somehow closer to you. And then there's the viewpoint. I feel like an ant or a wasp looking up at these huge forms. And the colours aren't actually that naturalistic. They aren't the sort of colours you would normally expect of a pear. It's almost acid green. The red of the apples are rather sort of wine-coloured. But it doesn't worry me. They're rather balanced. The two greens, the two reds. It's a little symphony of fruit.
I took it to Christie's in 1995. Their response was very positive. They said for it to be authenticated, it needs to be sent to the Giorgio de Chirico Foundation in Rome. And then they sent me this document for transporting the picture, and as you can see, they insured it for £30,000.
Whoa.
Yes.
So Christie's thought it was sufficiently interesting that they were going to send it to Rome on your behalf.
That's right.
And insure it for £30,000. Oh my God. That must have been a great moment when you saw that.
It's very exciting. It was very exciting.
But the thing that strikes me about this picture more than almost anything else is the setting. You know, normally with a still life, you would expect the objects to be in a basket or a bowl, but not here. They're in a large unfurling landscape with trees in the background and clouds scudding through the sky. And that's what one could imagine possibly at a Chirico. Putting things in unusual places, startling you with the non-obvious. I don't know quite what it is at this point, but I can't help believing that it's something.
The picture came back to Christie's in 1997, and they said, I'm afraid it is disappointing, in that those that sat on the committee, the majority thought it was correct, but one said that he thought it wasn't. And for authentication, the opinion has to be unanimous.
Oh, so close.
It was very, very close.
Did they give you any indication as to why this one dissenting voice thought it wasn't a genuine de Chirico?
There is a walnut in the picture. And Christie said there was no comparison for a walnut in any of de Chirico's compositions.
The hugely positive thing is that only one person thought it wasn't genuine. I mean, that's terrific. The downside, as I know from doing many of these programmes now, is that When you ask a foundation to change its mind, that's a big ask.
Yes.
They don't like to admit that they were wrong in the past. And sometimes they won't even look at a painting again. So, well, this walnut may prove a tough nut to crack. I'm sorry, I couldn't help it.
But before we start cracking nuts and searching for art-loving generals, there's one key question we need to answer. Will the De Chirico Foundation even agree to reconsider Bob's picture? The heads of the foundation have agreed to meet us, so we're in Rome to find out.
So tricky with committees. I mean, often they don't even let us through the front door.
Well, I'm excited that at least we have the opportunity to meet them.
But I wouldn't worry, Fiona. With your people skills, I'm sure you'll be able to push your way in.
I'm sure that'll put them right off.
The foundation is in De Chirico's home, right at the base of the Spanish Steps.
I feel like the Three Amigos.
We've come to meet the two men who hold the fate of Bob's picture in their hands. President Paolo Picozza was De Chirico's lawyer and friend, and Professor Fabio Benzi wrote the latest biography of De Chirico. This is the studio where De Chirico worked, and, if it's genuine, where he might have painted Bob's picture.
Lei, signore, conosceva.
You knew De Chirico. What kind of man was he?
I knew De Chirico in the last 5 years of his life, and he was an extraordinary person, very erudite, but he did not suffer fools. Therefore, you had to be very careful with what you said to him. If you said something stupid, he would reply in a more provocative and stupid way.
De Chirico was clearly the type of man who left an impression. But will the foundation give Bob's picture a second chance?
Yes, we will look at the painting again. We only do this with pictures we think are worth our time. This picture seems to have the feel of a De Chirico. It has a good look to it, and is the kind of subject that he would have done.
Looking at this picture, it's close to De Chirico's style. The fruit feels a bit laboured, but still, it is worth revisiting.
Well, this is really encouraging. Well, we will bring you the original painting for you to look at. Your £1 painting.
Wow.
And see if we have enough evidence to make you change your minds. Molte grazie.
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 Grazie a voi.
Now we know the foundation will look at Bob's picture again. We can start gathering new evidence. It's going to be an uphill battle, and we'll need all the help we can get. I've come to the nearby Erziana Art Library to meet Victoria Noel Johnson, one of the world's leading experts on De Chirico. Victoria worked for 10 years as the curator of the foundation, and her advice could be crucial.
Right, here it is, Victoria. Initial impressions.
Okay, so there are various elements that are more convincing than others. The apple here, for example, on the left, is beautifully painted. But here in the foreground, it almost looks like it's unfinished. Perhaps the most convincing element for me is this walnut in the bottom right-hand corner.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because when the painting was shown to the De Chirico Foundation originally, as we understand it, the walnut was what caused real problems for them. They didn't like it.
I mean, the way in which it's been painted looks probably the most convincing part of the painting. De Chirico does paint a series of still lifes in the 1950s and the early 60s that do occasionally have a walnut.
Really?
So I think that would be an avenue that needs to be looked at.
Once again, this innocent-looking nut seems to be key to Bob's picture. Who'd have thought £50,000 could rest on a walnut?
Could this be cropped, this picture?
That's a good observation, because here, why would you have cut part of the apple off on the left? You would normally see a complete still life. There are exceptions.
And what about the colour, for example?
So the colour is quite flat. There is a possibility that it could be painted in tempera.
And tempera is when you use egg and water to mix the paint together.
Exactly,
instead
rather
of
than oil. Yeah. So it gives you this lighter, in terms of palette, end effect. De Chirico in the 1940s and the 50s did a lot of experimentation with technique. He produced actually a number of technical recipes specifying the exact doses of the materials, the ingredients that he put into that technique.
De Chirico's recipes could really help us. But before we get carried away, Victoria has some bad news.
A word of warning though. De Chirico is the second most forged Italian artist. He is, there are a huge number of forgeries out there.
Well, it's not the first time we've come across this problem on Fake or Fortune. We're going to have to tread carefully.
Back at the foundation, Bob and I are getting to know De Chirico. His house is filled with paintings and sculptures from his long career. The paintings he's most famous for are the unsettling works from the 1910s, filled with faceless mannequins, harsh lighting and warped perspectives. But in 1919, something happened. Declaring modern art to be ugly, poorly painted and utterly devoid of talent, he turned his back on it and returned to the subjects and techniques of the old masters. Suddenly, portraits, landscapes, and of course, still lives sprang from his brush. I want to show Bob one painting which I think looks very familiar.
Now, Bob, have a look at this brace of pomegranates. Does it remind you of yours?
Yes, very much. It's the same subject matter and the same approach.
I mean, it's very similar in my view. I mean, first there's the scale of them. I mean, they're huge, aren't
If you'd never seen a pomegranate before, you would ask, how vast is a pomegranate?
You would, and therefore you think about the pomegranate in a different way. And also there's something about the setting as well, which is fascinating. I mean, this could be at any time in the last few thousand years. And there's almost a dreamlike quality about the way you perceive the fruit as well, don't you feel?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of superfruit.
Humble subject matter is somehow elevated to significance.
The man who did these pomegranates seems very closely related. I'm not saying it is to Chirico yet, but seems very closely related in the way that he's looking at it, the way he's expressing it, the way he's placing it in this timeless landscape to the fruit in your picture.
Yeah. That was wonderful. It put my picture into the context of the artist's life's work, and it's very encouraging. It encourages me to think that there is a chance.
One final stop. De Chirico came to Caffè Greco every day for an aperitif. So, when in Rome...
Victoria sent me through photographs of the original recipes that De Chirico came up with.
Yeah.
This is his handwriting, to create his paint effect. And look, there's the most extraordinary things in it, like one twaddler, which is an egg yolk, one, I think they were measured out in coffee spoons, of vinegar, 2 spoons of rubber gum, and then one of miele, which is honey. They're just extraordinary concoctions.
It's really fascinating. He obviously used different recipes in order to get different sort of painterly effects, which gives me a thought, because if we can recreate the same effect as we see in Bob's picture, using one of these recipes, well, it could take us closer to De Chirico.
Well, while you do that, I'm going to look into fakes, because I hate to say it, but De Chirico was massively faked. And that's certainly something I've got to investigate.
Back in London, I've got an appointment with someone who's seen her fair share of fake De Chiricos. I brought Bob to Bonham's auction house, who have teams dedicated to weeding out forgeries. India Phillips is the head of Impressionist and Modern Art.
India, who is faking De Chirico?
Well, he's very interesting because the issue, in a way, starts with De Chirico himself. He himself was falsifying his own works during his lifetime, backdating them, if you will. So during the 50s, 60s and 70s, he was painting his own pieces from, say, the 20s or 30s, which were much higher in value even at the time, and presenting them as works from that earlier period.
So he's faking himself?
He's faking himself, yeah.
This is a new one on me. An artist faking his own work. This painting is dated 1924, but it was actually painted in the 1970s. And De Chirico did this a lot, sometimes for friends, sometimes to sell, and sometimes, it seems, just for mischief. Arguably, any painting he made can't be a true fake, but they are out there. Surrealist Max Ernst, who'd been inspired by De Chirico, produced forgeries as well.
Max Ernst made a number of works that appear very much to be De Chirico's works, but are sometimes signed Max Ernst and sometimes signed De Chirico. But I think that was very much in keeping with the surrealist mind to play these kind of tricks on attribution and authenticity.
Unhelpful, though, in the circumstances.
Very.
So how would you feel if your painting actually turned out to be a Max Ernst?
I'd be delighted.
And were they just plain bog standard fakers, if you like?
Definitely. For example, this article details probably the most notorious faker of De Chirico's work, a man called Peretti.
Working throughout the 1970s, Renato Peretti claimed the De Chirico catalogue was full of his forgeries.
Over here we can see a number of the 60 works that he declared that he had definitely painted.
Well, there's quite a few still lifes here.
There are.
There's a still life there, and there's a still life there.
And
actually lots of them. Hang on, Bob.
I'm trying to find mine.
Is Bob's picture amongst this rogues gallery of Peretti fakes?
Look at this landscape and these trees. This is very similar to yours, isn't it?
It is.
And this has got a walnut here.
It has.
Well, it's not here.
So Bob's painting isn't here, but that doesn't mean it's not a fake.
So we've got De Chirico kind of faking himself. Then you've got artists like Max Ernst creating fake De Chiricos and signing them De Chirico. We've got this Peretti guy. Any more out there?
Well, there's certainly other hands besides Peretti that we've seen faking works by De Chirico.
Minefield.
To say the least.
We need a date for our picture, so I'm off to one of London's leading art libraries to do some research. The Whit Library has copies of paintings by thousands of artists, including De Chirico. He changed style throughout his career, returning to still lives again and again to perfect his technique. This box has over 60 years' worth of examples. They list when the pictures were painted and what they were painted in. For a likely date, I need to find examples which match Bob's picture.
If you look at the really early ones from the 20s, they're very different to Bob. They're rather two-dimensional, the colours are not particularly daring. If you look at the work of the 60s, well, that's very different. It's staged, rather contrived. But then look at this picture from the middle of his career, about 1950. I think here we're getting far closer to Bob's painting.
Both pictures feature piled fruit in a rolling landscape with scudding clouds and simple trees. Our viewpoint makes the fruit appear monumental, looming before us.
In the middle part of his development, I think we're seeing things which are quite close to that £1 picture of Bob's. But just as we're making progress, it now seems that we've hit a problem. This painting is described as being in oil. Now, if you look at other works by De Chirico from the 40s and 50s, they all seem to be in oil paint.
There are dozens of works from this period, all so similar to Bob's picture, but there's one crucial difference.
Bob's picture doesn't appear to be in oil. It's almost certainly egg tempera. The surface is flat and matte, just looks different. Now, although his early works, like this one here, were in tempera, if we're going to fit Bob's picture stylistically into the 40s and early 50s, and frankly, that's really the only period it can be, we need to explain why the materials are not right for the period.
So, no paperwork, an unexplained painting technique, and thousands of known fakes. In short, we have a problem. We're joining forces at the gallery to see if we can put any of these issues to bed.
Hello.
Hi there. So, plenty of forgers and fakers in the murky world of De Chirico, I'm afraid.
Well, he's an artist worth faking, let's face it.
But one thing that looked like a distinct disadvantage to begin with is now turning out to be something rather more positive, which is the lack of signature on Bob's picture. Because if you look at fakers of De Chirico, Renato Peretti, for example, all these paintings by him look worryingly like Bob's picture, except for one thing.
Oh, they're all signed.
And we haven't found a single forgery of a De Chirico without a signature. And when you look at De Chirico's paintings, the genuine article, look at these two. Neither of them have a signature, even from this one of his most successful earlier periods and this later period. So it's possible, if he did paint Bob's picture, that he just didn't sign it.
Yes. And I can add something to that. I've been cogitating the format of the picture. And, you know, when we first saw it, I remember thinking that it looked a little bit cropped. And therefore, the rather sort of worrying possibility presented itself that perhaps it was once signed, visible at the edge, but that it had been cut down.
I mean, I thought it looked cropped as well, but is it likely that if you're going to crop a picture, you crop the signature out?
Oh, you'd be amazed what can happen to paintings. They often get cropped to adapt them to a new size for a frame or a shape or a space. But having now looked at it much more carefully, I found what I suppose you could describe as drops of blood at the crime scene. But in this case, it's paint from the surface. Because if you look at the edge, you can see, particularly when I do mark it with my pen here, these little flecks. Now that is the same paint that you see on top.
The pre-existing damage to the frame has exposed an important clue. If the picture had once been bigger, but had been cropped and the signature cut off, any paint flecks on the side would have been cut off as well.
So we are left, therefore, with the inescapable conclusion it was never signed.
So it's unlikely then that Bob's picture is an out-and-out fake. But we still can't say what it is.
If we're going to prove Bob's picture is a genuine De Chirico, we need to dig up some provenance. How did something painted in a Roman studio end up in a Hampshire junk shop? I'm meeting Bob in Lymington, where he bought the painting in 1993, to find some answers.
We're a fair old way from Rome now, Bob.
Yes.
And this is where you used to live as a young man?
Yes, I lived up there and just round the corner. Used to work up there around the corner.
And here is what used to be Aladdin's Cave.
That's right, and it's now Thai and Malaysian takeaway.
No, it's a takeaway. But even though it's changed so much, we managed to track down the owner, who's given us some photographs of what it used to be like when you knew it. So here we are. This is all a bit more familiar, isn't it?
Yes.
What?
That's exactly how I remember it.
I'm amazed you managed to find amongst all this stuff.
Well, a brightly coloured picture like mine shone out on the wall at the back.
So you spotted it like a magpie?
Yes.
And went for it. And is this somewhere you used to stop by quite often? See what they had?
Well, I used to get my lunch just up there, and I knew the people who ran it, so I used to pop in just to say hello.
Well, the owner, sadly, has no recollection of this painting whatsoever. Now seeing the inside of the shop, I'm not that surprised.
Right.
But our search doesn't end there. Come with me.
I want to show Bob what we've found, and what better way than over tea and cake?
One theory, if you remember, was that it may have come from the estate of a retired military colonel who died without children. So, it turns out there were quite a few military colonels and captains who lived around Lymington. We've been in touch with the family of each and every one, which has been quite an undertaking. Sadly, none of them have any recollection of the painting or even think it was likely that the retired military colonel captain would have had a painting.
So is that a red
like
herring?
that. It sounds like it. It sounds like it. So then we decided to speak to the art galleries and institutions in the area, to local Facebook groups. We even spoke to the ex-mayoress of Lymington, to local papers, as many outlets as we could think of. Mm-hmm. We even went so far as to put an ad in the local paper. It's pretty decent size.
Fantastic.
There's your picture. How many responses do you think we got to that?
It's either going to be 100 or none.
Well, it is none.
Right, OK.
We didn't get any.
Right.
So your painting is a total mystery as far as Aladdin's Cave, Lymington, and this wider area is concerned. I mean, this is not a big area. It's quite a small town. You'd think that someone would have some recollection or even some idea about it. But we've literally drawn a blank everywhere.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I cannot think of anything else we can do to try and go from Aladdin's Cave backwards. Mm-hmm. But what we can try and do now is go from De Chirico and try and work out where did it go from him and see if that takes us from Rome all the way back here to Lymington.
Right. A challenge.
It certainly is.
Meanwhile, I want to know if the paint used in Bob's picture matches any of De Chirico's recipes. He published some during his lifetime, so I've sent them to another artist to take a look. Philippa Abrahams is an expert in historic painting techniques and regularly uses tempera in her own work. I'm hoping she can shed some light on the materials used in Bob's picture.
Philippa, we're increasingly with the feeling that our painting is done in tempera. What are the advantages of painting in that material over oil painting?
It dries quickly, and you can put one layer over another on the same day without disturbing the coat underneath. Whereas with oil paint, you can blend it, but you've got to wait weeks, months to put another layer on.
I see. So there's a distinct advantage for the speed and spontaneous way in which you can put a painting together using tempera.
Yeah. Yes.
Now, you've had a look at some of De Chirico's weird and wonderful recipes.
Yeah.
Can you demonstrate how you'd have made one of these mixtures?
I can. It's like doing a cooking demonstration.
Please show me.
OK.
She's not wrong. De Chirico's recipe is filled with ingredients from the kitchen cupboard as well as the paint box.
Just separating the yolk from the white. Maybe scalpel.
After an egg yolk, Philippa adds spoonfuls from half a dozen other jars. Was this the same recipe which De Chirico followed to make Bob's picture? Finally, the concoction comes together with a texture combining glue, jam, and mayonnaise.
This is the medium or the binder for the colour for the pigment. Put some in there.
OK.
Dip your brush in the medium.
Sure.
Pick up the pigment, the colour. We're going to use some Prussian blue. Mix it round, and we've made paint.
Well, let's now hope that you can create an effect that looks like Bob's picture.
I try, yes.
We're leaving Philippa to her experiments, testing out recipes to find which one is just right.
So far, it feels like Bob's picture has just appeared out of thin air. So I'm looking for any clues to explain how it came to the UK. But once again, I'm drawing a blank. There's been no mention of our picture among the lists of exhibitions, gallery sales, or major collectors in Britain.
But one name has come up of interest, Vera Morris. She lived here in Britain after the war, and De Chirico used to write to her in the 1940s. I've managed to find a biography of her online. Now, Vera Morris was a singer. It says De Chirico heard Vera singing and was completely enchanted. It talks about how they became friends. And then it says Whenever I walked into the house, this is the person writing the biography, I was impressed with the portrait that hung on the wall almost at the entrance. It was a portrait painted by Giorgio de Chirico. So Vera Morris, well, she had at least one picture by her friend Giorgio de Chirico. Maybe she had others. Now, this biography is written by a woman called Vesna Domani Hardy. Vera Morris has died, but Vesna is still alive. And I'm going to try and track her down.
Philippa has been working her way through hundreds of de Chirico recipes. If we can show Bob's painting shares any of these unusual ingredients, we'll be a step closer to proving it's genuine.
So what are we looking at here?
These are the failures, if you like. These are recipes that I didn't enjoy using and I don't think work. They were not nice to handle. And this one is still sticky. So if you want something that dries quickly so you can paint one layer over another, this isn't it.
Yeah, I have to say I wouldn't be taken in, and the colours don't seem to blend properly.
No, it was very difficult to sort of get them to do anything. So the recipe that I found most successful was this.
I think that's a real achievement. In fact, that's rather remarkable. I can see on the onion those strokes that you're talking about, dry upon dry.
Yeah, and they were delicious to do. I mean, it was really nice.
But I think more than that, you've managed to get those sort of rather mellow, matte appearance of Bob's picture.
Yeah.
The comparison is striking. Philippa has found a recipe which really does replicate the distinctive textures and tones we're looking for. The question is, which one of the recipes was the winning formula?
The recipe includes egg yolk, gum arabic, honey, vinegar, turpentine, and linseed oil.
Linseed oil? You just mentioned linseed oil. I thought tempera didn't have oil in it.
Classic egg tempera didn't have oil in it, but an oil would aid flexibility and change the flow of the paint.
I mean, that's really interesting. Because if de Chirico was using oil with his tempera, all of those paintings that have been blithely described as oil paintings during the period we're looking at could, in fact, be tempera with this unusual addition of oil in it.
Yes. Paintings were labelled as oil painting because people got stuck on the notion that tempera just means egg. And it's not true.
That's really exciting. That's something that could really help us.
Yeah.
So from the long list of unusual de Chirico recipes, there's one front runner for Bob's picture. As well as common ingredients like egg and turpentine, Philippa thinks that the paint has more surprising elements like vinegar and honey.
The question now is, will science be able to back up what we've just witnessed? In other words, will we be able to find in Bob's picture ingredients such as honey and oil?
To find out, we've sent the painting to the Hamilton Carr Institute, world leaders in scientific art analysis. They scan the picture to pinpoint the molecular fingerprint of the paint. Can they find the unusual ingredients Philippa suggested? These results need to be processed at their labs in Cambridge.
We have one last roll of the dice on the Provenance trail, de Chirico's British friend, Vera Morris. I've tracked down her biographer, Vesna Domani Hardy. Could she hold the answer?
Vesna, you were friends with Vera, who was a close friend of de Chirico's. What can you tell me about their relationship?
They were friends who first met in Rapallo and
in Italy.
In Italy, where Vera had summer engagements to sing in a private villa. And she was telling me it was a wonderful atmosphere after the war, and everybody was very excited and happy, enthusiastic. And among the audience was de Chirico. And he was totally charmed and entranced by Vera. And they became friends. She became his muse, inspiration.
And this picture here, this is de Chirico.
This is de Chirico.
And that's his wife. So I'm assuming this is Vera,
This is Vera. This is when he came in 1950s. He had an exhibition in London.
She looks very vivacious and
She
captivating.
She was very captivating. She was charming. She was enchanting person. No wonder he fell for her.
His songbird. And this picture here, he painted this portrait of her, I assume, is it?
He painted. He did a portrait of her and gave it to her.
She must have had that in pride of place, I imagine.
Yeah, it was always then in her house by the entrance door.
It's rather wonderful.
So you knew that the Kiriko was a friend as you entered the house.
Did she have other pictures by De Chirico?
Oh yes, she had smaller pictures always. They were not big in size. I think there were pictures that he probably could have sent her. The situation at the time was quite difficult.
Or financially.
Financially, and his way of helping her was to send her drawings, pictures, which he thought she could sell. And
so are we talking dozens of paintings that he sent her?
I think so.
I just wonder if the picture we're looking at was among them. Does that ring a bell at all?
I couldn't say that I saw the picture there. It's too long ago.
Oh, all these letters. So these are all letters from De Chirico.
These are all the letters for De Chirico.
Does he mention pictures in these at all?
Oh yes, you can see he keeps writing that he's sending her pictures.
Oh my gosh! How
look
amazing!
Look here, and this is Roma, 27 luglio.
He said, I woke up this morning and I said to myself, I need to do a picture for Vera. So I'm sending you a little drawing that I did especially for you. I made it la grandezza della busta, the same size as the envelope. With this system, I can send you lots of drawings. Oh my gosh. Le bacio la mano. He kisses her hand. Oh, hang on, then he's talking about a little, questo piccolo disegno senza firma, this little drawing without a signature, and I'm sending it to you, begging you not to get cross. And if some other time, I'm able to send you some other pictures without a signature, I'll try to send you something un po' più importante, a little bit more important. Wow. And how long did this go on for? This is 1948. When did they
go till 1952. And then the friendship slowly sort of was dwindling out. I think he found another muse, actually. It comes in the letters later that he's constantly with another young woman who's inspiring. Vera by then had children and lived in another country.
This is amazing. This is amazing because if Bob's picture is by De Chirico, one of the big questions is how on earth did it end up in Britain? Here we have evidence that De Chirico is sending signed and unsigned pictures, as ours is, to the UK from 1948 onwards. These letters could provide the answer.
This could be the answer.
I mean, this, as documentation goes, doesn't get much better than this.
I don't think so.
In the hand of the great man himself. Everything about Vera's letters fits with Bob's picture. It's a deliciously tempting theory. The size, the fact that the paintings don't necessarily have a signature, that they were sold in Britain, it could explain how Bob's picture ended up in the UK.
The results are in from the Hamilton Carr Institute. Bob and I have come to their labs in Cambridgeshire where I'm hoping science will back up Philippa's kitchen sink recipes. Rupert Featherstone is the director of the Institute.
So Rupert, what have you found inside this painting that could be useful to us?
Well, initial results are definitely out of the ordinary, I'd say.
Out of the ordinary?
Yes, definitely.
We can handle out of the ordinary, but it depends what type of out of the ordinary.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay, so what about the actual paint?
Well, first things we did some imaging using X-radiography. What you see, firstly, there are some forms appearing that don't show on the surface. So particularly this curve with these little cross strokes. And then there's a very strong stroke there and a form.
The X-ray shows a number of half-finished ideas lurking beneath the top layer of paint.
I find that rather encouraging because this shows the stirrings, the creative process, the ruminating, how it's going to work. Just the sort of thing you want if you want to prove that this is an original work of art.
Yes.
So it's not a slavish copy of something.
Not at all.
That's quite a nice thing.
Very encouraging.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, the next stage, we took it to a colleague of mine to use Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, which is looking at the molecular fingerprints of the components in the medium. And what we found was that these particular little mountain peaks here, here, and here, funnily enough, correspond to oil.
Oh.
Which was a surprise.
But oil was on Philippa's menu.
Philippa thought that the De Chirico recipe used in Bob's picture contained linseed oil, and it looks like she was right. But has Rupert found any of the other expected ingredients?
We have one other significant peak, and that is honey.
Honey!
Wonderful.
And that is not usual.
Well, I can't tell you how pleased I am to see that word honey, to see that sweet truth upon your screen. But have you ever found honey in a picture?
No.
But it's idiosyncratic.
I would say so, yes.
So the paint in Bob's picture was made with both honey and oil, just like the most convincing De Chirico recipe.
This is progress, Bob. This is progress. It's unusual progress.
Yes. As I say, it's an unusual picture.
That's very exciting.
I'm heading back to Italy to put our unusual picture through one final unusual test. I'm turning to the board the picture's painted on to prove whether it was made before 1952. This fact is vital because if not, it blows our Vera Morris theory out of the water. I've come to Florence, not to a gallery, but to a nuclear laboratory, armed with a splinter of wood from Bob's picture. Here they test wood for radioactive carbon, something found in all living creatures, which massively increased across the globe after hundreds of nuclear bombs were tested in the 1950s. By cleaning, freezing, then accelerating the wood to a mind-boggling 27 million miles per hour, they can measure the concentration of radiocarbon in Bob's picture. Dr. Marielena Fedi is the director of the lab.
If we measure the radiocarbon concentration, for example, in wood, we can date it with a precision of almost 1 year in some certain period.
This graph shows the spike in global radiocarbon in the 1950s. All plants and animals alive at this date absorbed these higher levels of radioactivity.
And that's an extraordinary thought, isn't it? That everything that was alive in the 1950s, across the entire globe, absorbed some of that nuclear fallout.
Yeah, it is a sort of good consequence, if I can say this, of these terrible nuclear tests, because we actually can use this particular behavior to find the true age of the sample.
If De Chirico sent Vera the picture before 1952, the wood will have a low concentration of radiocarbon. If the levels are too high, it means the board was made after the 1950s and so could not have been sent to Vera Morris.
What were you able to find out about Bob's picture?
Well, if we see to the screen, we can see that in this case, we find that the most probable result is here. So the tree was cut before the nuclear bomb testing.
That's very interesting indeed. So this rules out anything later than the 1950s.
Yes.
And it means that Bob's picture was painted on a board from a tree that was cut down.
Yep, before.
Before the 1950s. Well, that would be very good news for Bob and his picture. Because if it was later than that, we would have a bit of a problem.
Okay.
How amazing that from something so horrifically toxic as the nuclear bomb testing in this laboratory outside Florence, we can get this result. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's amazing, isn't it, to think that Bob's £1 picture has now been through the most advanced testing we've ever done on this programme. And what it's shown us is that the board on which the picture was painted has come from a tree
that was cut down before the 1950s, and crucially, that keeps it in our timeline. If De Chirico sent the picture to Vera Morris sometime between 1948 and 1952. Now, of course, the science can't tell us that exactly, but what it does tell us is that our theory is still possible.
I've time for one last stop in Italy, and I've heard from Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi, Fiona.
She's uncovered a final piece of the puzzle that is Bob's picture.
Well, I've been doing some research and I found several examples of his still lifes with walnuts or large nuts dating to the 1940s to the 1950s.
Great.
Victoria has found almost a dozen examples of De Chirico still lives with walnuts. Just like in Bob's picture, all of them are in the foreground, detached from the rest of the fruit. 20 years ago, the Foundation questioned whether Bob's walnut was right for De Chirico. Perhaps we've found an answer.
He's obviously inserting that element in his work from the 1940s onwards.
Who would ever have thought that we'd be examining the great De Chirico's work for walnut content? But so, anyway, we found some, or you have, so well done.
This painting here is the early 1950s, clearly shows a walnut in the lower left. And the landscape is quite interesting because that is, it's quite a good comparable with your painting. Because we have
this
these...
very similar, isn't it, here?
It is. Your painting has a similar cloudy background with these sort of trees.
So this is really encouraging, because the walnuts were certainly a problem for the Foundation in some way. And here we have lots of paintings with walnuts, some of which, or at least one of which, looks very similar to Bob's painting.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, the walnut for me is the most convincing element of the painting. But at the end of the day, it goes on the composition and the style.
And now it's up to the Foundation, see if they're convinced.
It's down to the Foundation.
We've taken our investigation as far as we can. Back in Rome, Victoria is resubmitting the painting to the Authentication Committee. And for once, our cameras have been allowed to film the process. In a back room of the building, the committee assemble. We've compiled all our evidence into a dossier to make the case for Bob's picture. 25 years after they last saw it in the flesh, will any of our new research be sufficient to change their mind and overturn their original decision?
A week later, the painting's been returned, along with a letter containing the Foundation's verdict. We're waiting for Bob and Vanessa to arrive to find out the answer together.
After all the months we spent researching this picture, as far as provenance goes, we've got some great theories, but nothing concrete. But it is a picture that has fought its corner. I'll give it that. The bomb peak analysis test was very encouraging. And the people that know about De Chirico, Victoria, the De Chirico Foundation, they are certainly taking it seriously.
I have to say, from the first moment I saw it, I responded confidently to it. And as we've gone on, so that confidence has grown. I was greatly reassured that we found within the actual body of this painting the same menu that he used involving oil and honey.
So, what a story it would be. The picture for £1 that turns out to be by one of the great Italian artists.
That would be wonderful.
We feel we've made a really strong case, but it's now in the hands of the Foundation. With Bob and Vanessa at the door, it's time to find out whether the picture belongs in a gallery or back in the junk shop.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Bob and Vanessa.
Hi, hello.
So, this is the moment of truth for the old £1 bargain basement buy. I'm feeling a bit tense, I must admit. I don't know how you're feeling.
Well, I feel as if I'm a winner either way, because if this is right, in that case, it'll be a fantastic windfall just before the children go to university. And if it's wrong, this plucky little picture that I bought for £1 has taken us on the most fantastic journey. It's been taken seriously by all the authorities, and I've grown very fond of it.
And what about you, Vanessa?
Oh, yeah, I'm just really excited to hear the outcome. It's been an interesting journey that Bob's been on, and it'd be lovely to hear the news.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of people out there who do and will think that it's a lovely image. And it's just a question of attaching that transformative name, the Maestro de Chirico. It's a name with real resonance. The odds are high, but my goodness me, what a diamond in the rough that would be a de Chirico for £1.
Yes.
Shall we see what's in this envelope?
Let's do it.
Oh, it's in Italian. Il Comitato per le opere ritenute autentiche. It's not de Chirico. Gosh, I am surprised. I'm really sorry. Let me just check I've read this right. Il Comitato per le opere ritenute autentiche del maestro si esprime nella seguente maniera. Il dipinto, the painting, non è, is not in alcun modo, in any way, ascrivibile. It is in no way by Giorgio de Chirico. God, that's what they're saying.
Wow, sounds quite extreme.
I'm so sorry. God, I didn't think it was going to go this way.
No.
The committee's letter is unusually detailed. They thought we had some strong evidence, but they're still not convinced.
They acknowledge that we found honey in the use of materials. They're saying that the structure of the painting is a little uncertain to them, incerta, as they call it. The fruit seems amassed, unnaturally placed. The absence of provenance, I knew that was going to be a problem. The absence of provenance, it's not been possible to take it back to the maestro. They think the painting is an imitation, carried out as an exercise. So it's not pretending to be a de Chirico.
Okay.
That's why there's no signature on, in their view.
Oh,
Bob and Vanessa, I'm gutted, actually.
That's £1 I won't get back.
It is bitterly disappointing, but it's worth hanging on to the facts that the composition, the materials, the date of the picture, it all indicates someone who must have known de Chirico, who probably worked very, very close to him. So there's an intimacy to the maestro, even if it's not, alas, the master himself.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm very, very happy with that letter. Maybe the contents of it, the message, is a little disappointing.
A little.
But the picture has been explored and it has been considered by everybody. It has been taken seriously.
Your plucky picture.
My plucky picture.
I'm gutted. I'm really gutted by that letter. When the analysis showed honey, I thought, well, that's it. There may be no provenance, but this gets us over the line. I was sure of it.
Yeah, it's really sad. And it's also a novel one for us. This is an artist who'd clearly studied or watched de Chirico work. He knew the materials, the paint strokes. This is not a fake. This is something different. It's a homage. And it's yet another subtlety in this world of art in which we seek to find answers.
If you think you have an undiscovered masterpiece or other precious object, contact us at bbc.co.uk/fakeorfortune.
Just what does it take for bright working-class youngsters to break into Britain's prestigious professions? Amol Rajan investigates just how to break into the elite. Available now on iPlayer.